Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we journey into the ancient hills of Israel, into a time of faith and fear, of pursuit and providence. Before we enter tonight's story, let us remember where we have been. David, the shepherd boy from Bethlehem, was anointed by the prophet Samuel to be king over Israel while still a youth tending his father's sheep. He came to King Saul's court as a musician, soothing the troubled king's spirit with his harp. When the Philistine giant Goliath defied the armies of the living God, young David stepped forward with nothing but a sling, 5 smooth stones, and unwavering faith. He struck down the giant, and all Israel celebrated. David became a warrior in Saul's army, winning victory after victory. The people sang his praises in the streets. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. These songs planted seeds of jealousy in Saul's heart that grew into a dark and terrible obsession. Twice, Saul hurled his spear at David as the young man played music to calm him. Twice, David escaped. Saul's son Jonathan loved David as his own soul, and they made a covenant of friendship that would endure all trials. Saul's daughter Michal became David's wife, and she too loved him. But Saul's jealousy had become madness, and the king who once loved David now sought his life. And so our story begins, with David caught between the love of a troubled king and that king's growing desire to destroy him. War broke out again with the Philistines, and David went out to fight. The Lord was with him, and he struck the Philistines with such a great blow that they fled before him. David returned victorious, but in Saul's palace, darkness stirred once more. As David played his harp, the music floating through the lamplit chamber, the evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. The king sat with his spear in his hand, and as the notes rose and fell, something twisted within him. Suddenly, Saul raised the spear and hurled it at David, trying to pin him to the wall. But David was quick. He slipped away, and the spear struck the wall with a terrible thud, quivering there as David fled into the night. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch it through the darkness and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, discovered her father's plan. Through the window of their home, she looked down and saw the men positioned in the shadows. "If you don't escape tonight," she whispered urgently to David, "tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through a window, and he slipped away into the darkness, running from the city he had served so faithfully. To deceive her father's men, Michal took a household idol and laid it in the bed, putting goat's hair at its head and covering it with clothes. When Saul's messengers came to seize David, she told them, "He is sick." The men reported this to Saul, but the king commanded, "Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him." When they came and pulled back the covers, they found only the idol with the goat's hair. Saul's anger burned against his daughter, but David was already far away. David fled to Ramah, to the dwelling of Samuel the prophet, the man who had anointed him as a boy. He told Samuel all that Saul had done to him, and Samuel received him. Together they went to Naioth, where Samuel led a company of prophets, and there they stayed. Word reached Saul, "David is at Naioth in Ramah." Saul sent messengers to capture him. But when these men arrived at Naioth and saw the company of prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing as their leader, the Spirit of God came upon Saul's messengers. Instead of seizing David, they too began to prophesy. When Saul heard this strange report, he sent more messengers. The same thing happened. They arrived as soldiers and became prophets. Saul sent messengers a third time, and again the Spirit of God came upon them. Finally, Saul himself went to Ramah. He came to the great well at Secu and asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" "At Naioth in Ramah," someone answered. As Saul walked toward Naioth, the Spirit of God came upon him too. He walked along prophesying all the way to Naioth. Then he stripped off his royal robes and prophesied before Samuel. He lay there all that day and all that night, stripped of his kingly garments, humbled before the Lord. And people said, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" While Saul lay prophesying, David escaped once more. David fled to Jonathan, Saul's son, his beloved friend. They met in secret, and David's voice was filled with anguish. "What have I done? What is my guilt? What is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" Jonathan could hardly believe it. "Far from it, you shall not die. My father does nothing either great or small without telling me. Why would he hide this from me?" But David knew better. "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, 'Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved.' But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." Jonathan's heart broke for his friend. "Whatever you say, I will do for you." David explained his plan. Tomorrow was the new moon, a feast day when David should sit at the king's table. "I will hide in the field until the third day at evening," David said. "If your father misses me, tell him I asked permission to go to Bethlehem for a yearly sacrifice with my family. If he says, 'Good,' then your servant is safe. But if he is angry, then you will know that he has determined to harm me." Jonathan agreed, and they made a plan for a signal. Jonathan would come to the field where David hid and shoot 3 arrows. If he said to his servant boy, "Look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them," then David would know it was safe. But if he said, "Look, the arrows are beyond you," then David must flee, for the Lord had sent him away. The two friends renewed their covenant before God. Jonathan made David swear by his love for him, for he loved David as he loved his own soul. And they embraced, knowing that whatever came, their friendship was bound by the Lord himself. The new moon came, and the king sat down to eat. Saul took his seat as usual, with his back against the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat beside Saul. But David's place was empty. Saul said nothing the first day, thinking perhaps David was ceremonially unclean. But on the second day, when David's place was empty again, Saul asked Jonathan, "Why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered as David had instructed. David earnestly asked permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, "Let me go, for our clan has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers." At these words, Saul's anger flared white hot. He turned on his own son with terrible fury. "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." Jonathan answered his father, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" But Saul hurled his spear at his own son to strike him. Then Jonathan knew that his father was determined to kill David. He rose from the table in fierce anger, ate no food that second day of the month, grieving for David because his father had disgraced him. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field at the appointed time, taking a young boy with him. He said to the boy, "Run and find the arrows I shoot." As the boy ran, Jonathan shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where the arrow had fallen, Jonathan called after him, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" Then he cried, "Hurry, be quick, do not stay." The boy gathered the arrows and brought them to his master, knowing nothing of what this meant. Only Jonathan and David understood. Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and sent him back to the city. As soon as the boy was gone, David rose from beside the stone heap where he had hidden and fell on his face to the ground, bowing 3 times. The 2 friends kissed each other and wept together, until David wept all the more. Jonathan said to him, "Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever.'" Then David arose and departed, and Jonathan went back to the city. The friends parted, not knowing when they would see each other again, but trusting that the Lord would keep the bond between them. David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech came to meet him trembling, afraid when he saw David alone. "Why are you alone, with no one accompanying you?" David said to him, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything about the matter.' I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." The priest answered, "I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread, the bread of the presence that was removed from before the Lord. You may have it if the young men have kept themselves from women." David assured him they had, and the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no other bread there. David also asked, "Do you have a spear or sword here?" "I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons, because the king's business required haste." The priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take that, take it, for there is none other here." And David said, "There is none like it, give it to me." With the giant's sword in hand and bread for his journey, David fled that day from Saul. David escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brothers and his father's house heard of it, they went down to him there. Everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. He became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. David went from there into the wilderness, moving from place to place, always one step ahead of Saul. Saul sought him every day, But God did not give David into his hand. The men with David grew to 600. They lived in the strongholds at En-gedi, among the crags and wild places where ibex leaped on the rocks and eagles soared overhead. There in the wilderness, David continued to trust in the Lord, composing psalms in the caves, singing of God's faithfulness, even while fleeing for his life. Word came to Saul, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men among the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds by the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of that very cave. The men whispered to David, "Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you." David rose and quietly crept toward the sleeping king. His heart pounded as he drew near. With careful, silent movements, he cut off a corner of Saul's robe. But afterward, David's heart struck him because he had cut off even this small piece of the robe of the Lord's anointed. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." David restrained his men and would not let them attack Saul. The king rose and left the cave, unaware of how close death had been, unaware of the mercy that had spared him. After Saul had left the cave and was walking away, David came out and called after him, "My lord the king." Saul turned and looked behind him. David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. Then he called out, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, David seeks your harm'? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand in the cave. Some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." David held up the corner of Saul's robe. "See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you. Know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it." His voice echoed across the wilderness. "May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be upon you. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you." David's words reached Saul's heart. The king looked at the piece of his robe in David's hand, understanding what it meant. David had been close enough to kill him, but had chosen mercy instead. Saul lifted up his voice and wept. "You are more righteous than I," he called back, "for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. You have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day." Then Saul made a confession that showed he knew the truth. "Now I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul returned home, and David and his men went back up to the stronghold. But the peace did not last. Once again, Saul gathered his army and came seeking David in the wilderness. David learned of it and sent out spies to be certain that Saul had come. David went to the place where Saul had encamped and saw where Saul and Abner, the commander of his army, were lying. Saul was sleeping within the encampment, with the army encamped around him. That night, David said to Ahimelech and Abishai, "Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul?" Abishai said, "I will go down with you." So David and Abishai went among the army by night. The Lord had caused a deep sleep to fall upon them all. Abishai whispered to David, "God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear. I will not need to strike him twice." But David said, "Do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed." Instead, David took the spear that was at Saul's head and the jar of water, and they went away. No one saw it or knew it, nor did anyone awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. David crossed over to the other side and stood far off on the top of the hill, with a great space between them. Then he called out to the army and to Abner, "Will you not answer, Abner?" Abner answered, "Who are you who calls to the king?" David said, "Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the jar of water that was at his head." Saul recognized David's voice and called out, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." He continued, "Why does my lord pursue after his servant? What have I done? What evil is on my hands? Now therefore let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is men, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day that I should have no share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, 'Go serve other gods.'" His voice carried across the wilderness. "Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth away from the presence of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Return my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have made a great mistake." David answered, "Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and take it. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord's anointed." Saul said, "Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will surely prevail." So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. But David knew in his heart that one day he would perish by the hand of Saul if he remained in Israel. The time of running was not yet over, but for now on this night, mercy had prevailed once more. And so we leave David in the wilderness, a man after God's own heart, showing mercy when he could have taken vengeance, trusting God when he could have seized power, waiting patiently when he could have grasped the crown that was promised to him. In the darkness of those caves, in the loneliness of those hills, David learned the lessons that would make him a great king. He learned that God's anointing is sacred, even when worn by one who has become an enemy. He learned that God's timing is perfect, even when it requires years of waiting. He learned that true strength lies not in taking what we can, but in showing mercy when we could destroy. David could have ended his suffering with one thrust of a spear. Twice he was given the opportunity, and twice he chose the harder path, the path of mercy and trust. He believed that God would establish him as king in God's own time, in God's own way. And as we rest tonight, let us carry this truth into our sleep, that the faithful waiting, the patient enduring, the merciful restraint, these are the marks of one who truly trusts in the Lord. The kingdom was promised to David, but he would not seize it through violence. He would receive it as a gift in God's perfect time. May you rest in this same trust tonight, knowing that what God has promised, God will bring to pass. May you sleep in peace, trusting not in your own strength or schemes, but in the Lord who sees, who knows, and who keeps his promises. The God who watched over David in the wilderness watches over you tonight. Rest, dear listener, rest in his faithfulness. Amen.